Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I welcome back Elif Item, a Dynamics 365 veteran and now Microsoft MVP. Elif specializes in developing user training through her company, Item by Item, and she's been publishing a series of short videos on MSDW recently about 10 dangers to avoid in D365 training. We discuss why she wanted to develop this new series of topics and what it says about the unique training needs of D365 F&O as well as CE customers. We also discuss Elif's early experiences as an MVP, her outlook on successful D365 project outcomes, and what the future of the D365 workforce will look like both in terms of skills and job expectations. Okay, well, Elif, welcome back to the podcast. So great to have you here. I'm excited to chat about a few different things today, starting with some of the work you've been doing with videos for us and a whole lot more.
Great. I'm so happy to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think first I do want to just say congratulations to you. You're now a Microsoft MVP, really well deserved, and a long time coming. I was really glad to hear that.
Thank you very much. It was an interesting process, and I actually didn't know as much about being an MVP, but I'm very honored, and also just it's been just such a great, wonderful thing to see the responses from everybody in LinkedIn, the people that I work with. So I'm definitely honored and a little bit drinking from the fire hose right now. A lot of information, but I'm looking forward to working with the other MVPs and also being an integral part of that community for Microsoft.
Yeah, it's so great to have you representing the community as someone who does something a little different than, I would say, the most common MVP profile. I know people do come from different kinds of professional backgrounds, but you certainly have an interesting one here that we're going to talk about, and what you bring to customers and to the kind of work that you do.
Yes, you're right. I do have a little bit of a different sort of background, but also what was interesting for me to find out is that there are not that many MVPs in the F&O space. There are only, with the addition of myself in the North America region, we are only 10 MVPs in the entire North America, which basically includes United States and Canada. And that was a little bit of a surprise for me, honestly. Within the business applications framework, F&O is a little bit less represented. I don't know the reason. I can guess some reasons, but Power Platform is very strong, and other parts of the biz apps is quite strong, but F&O doesn't seem to have a lot of representation within the MVP community. I think what makes F&O a little bit different is the entry point is not very low, and F&O is such a deep sort of product. And the resources that we have in the F&O area are really just, you have to come to a certain point of knowledge and experience, you have to invest a lot of time. And also, I think the F&O resources seem to be very much on the delivery side. So they seem to be very busy implementation and delivery sort of thing. And maybe being an MVP is not a super attractive endeavor for them. It does require quite a lot of publications, content creation, and being a part of community. Those are the things I could think of, that why F&O is not as much represented. But I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more as the group from the North America, we're already in connection, and then see if we can make it appealing and educate also. Hopefully this will be an opportunity too, is to how to become an MVP, or, it's not that actually, I don't want to say it's not that hard, but there's a process to it. And I think when people understand that process, hopefully we'll have more representation from the F&O product.
Yeah, just the one other thing I was thinking of as you said that was there is that other solution architect certification program, and as far as I know, they're kind of distinct, aren't they? With its own rigorous sort of qualification process, and it's more of a certification than it is a recognition, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe also another reason is in the other product areas, I think both technical and functional resources are in the MVP world. But in F&O, I think a lot of the technical resources are not really going for the MVP recognition, but more going into these other sort of recognitions that are being a fellow. And there, I think Microsoft offers a lot more sort of technical recognitions to these solution architects and people who put major big sort of infrastructure and implementation structures together. And I think it maybe makes the group split off a little bit more into those sort of recognitions. But I'd like to see more functional people and technical people to be more MVPs to represent the product, because there are lots of opportunities like meeting with product groups and knowing about what's coming a little bit earlier and interacting with other MVPs. So I think there are a lot of advantages to represent F&O in these discussions when certain decisions are being made.
Yeah. Is there anything else about, this year in particular, or anything to the sort of the background story of how you got the award, the recognition this year?
Well, the interesting thing about the MVP recognition is that the main requirement is that you have to be nominated by a Microsoft employee. The nomination process is done through a website that belongs to Microsoft, and you have to be an employee to be able to do that. In our case, actually, right after a conference that one of the Microsoft people that I actually closely work with in another project currently, he nominated me, and then you're basically provided an application form with lots of different options, and you have to fill out all of those information, some generic information about your background. But primarily what they're looking for is your contribution to the Microsoft. In my case, I was nominated, or I applied as D365, or the biz applications. It's a category called business applications within Microsoft. And you have to just explain to the panel why you're a good candidate, what you're doing in the my case, D365 space, writing blogs and attending different conferences, collaborating with other partners within this space, working with Microsoft. All of these things you're able to submit, and they review it. And I actually didn't hear from them for quite a long time. And there's not really a good indication of like if they're going to reply to you or not. They just say, we will let you know. And I was pleasantly surprised, but it took a couple of months, actually 5 months to be exact. Later on, then I have received the email indicating that I was now an MVP. And so the process itself is quite simple as far as the application, but then you just have to wait for it to be reviewed. And the MVP title is only given for 1 year. So from the date that you start as an MVP, you have 1 calendar year, then your MVP status will be reevaluated again. So it's not something that's like a lifetime. You obviously want to keep it, but to be able to keep it, you have to continue what you were doing, and hopefully even more now that you're a part of this community and you're able to attend these other activities and meetings, which would hopefully allow you to be a more active member of the community.
Yeah, and there's a rich community of alumni, I guess you would say, for the MVP program as well, who, for whatever reason, let the designation slip after some amount of time, or just didn't get renewed, and continued on doing great work, and still being experts and all that. But that's certainly, I've heard that from other MVPs that ongoing work is very significant, and it continues to be effort year after year to maintain it.
Yes, but also what is exciting for me is it offers me opportunities that are normally not available in my sort of line of work. Like last week, I was able to moderate a student summit for college students and high school students who are interested in Microsoft technology. And there was a presentation, and we moderated the chat. As a business applications person, I was answering questions about, if someone was interested in business applications as a product or a line of work, they were asking questions. So I like that sort of stuff. I'm in training. I'm in more professional training, but I also love like talking to college students and high school students about career in technology, specifically girls. Like that was something completely new out of my normal work and comfort zone, and I'm just very grateful that I get to do stuff like that as well.
Were the students receptive?
They were actually, there were a lot of, we'll talk a little bit about this topic later on. Of course, like there were so many questions and conversations about Chat GPT and AI and Copilot. And there was a large group of students in the chat that are more technical, and they want to be coders and, more technical sort of Microsoft technology providers. And I was just trying to explain to them, especially to some that are hoping to make a career change, that you don't necessarily have to be a coder or a super technical person to find growth for yourself in Microsoft space. You can be more functional. You can take project management work, training work, and there's a lot of room for those types of skills also in the Microsoft ecosystem. And there were some questions about that, and we've talked about it. But majority of it is, of course, like students are super excited and interested in AI, maybe a little bit nervous even to ask questions like, is coding job is going to be same, or are we still going to have coding jobs 5 years from now on, or if AI is going to do it. But it was a very kind of like a fun, youthful experience, and to see the upcoming generation of technology experts that are going to be coming into the field.
Yeah, it's such a fair question. I know we'll get into that too, but yeah, it is fascinating to imagine being asked those questions in this current climate, I guess you'd say. Well, getting back to the sort of community contribution more broadly, I think working with you myself, you've certainly done a lot. I mean, you've produced a lot of videos, and hopefully our listeners are aware of them. If not, we'll certainly link back to those. You're currently kind of in the middle of producing a 10-part series for us, which is really amazing, of sort of lessons learned for training in the D365 space. Each one's kind of a very interesting angle, I guess, on it. Can you talk a little bit about just like what the thinking was in kind of putting that set of content together?
I think what maybe helps me to have that sort of perspective, obviously I am currently working for a company, my own company, who does provide training. A lot of the conversation is about training, but I think that helps me to have a perspective about training as a topic within an implementation, is the fact that I myself was a consultant for many years, a project manager for many years, and I was also a director, and I was in charge of many projects and kept an eye on these projects. And this allowed me to really look into projects from the perspective of what is successful and what is not successful when it comes to training, and a company that's going through an F&O implementation, and nowadays sometimes even a bigger implementation. So the idea behind this series was, okay, what are some of the things that we know are a little bit of a trap within the implementation, that if we don't pay attention to it, that they can be problems. And if we actually do something about it in a positive way, we can really affect the trajectory of the implementation and learning of the users within the implementation. We've just kind of started a little bit with like core team training, importance of it, and how we can, for example, create a continuous training environment instead of more like a sort of a chopped approach. You do a little bit of a training up front, and then you don't do anything for several months sort of approach. We talk a little bit about learning styles instead of putting everybody into the same box. and assuming that everybody learns the same way is to just basically able to cater into different learning styles within the organization, and creating a certain consistency within the organization, especially when a company has multiple locations and multiple warehouses. How do we make sure that the same message is being conveyed to the users? So I felt like it's sort of a good way of giving our your community information about what they can do. They're short videos. We just kind of talk about the challenge first, what that danger is, and then in the second part of the video we talk about how you can avoid that challenge. What are some of the things you can do? And we also provide the written text for the video as well. So hopefully your readers and your community who watches the video, they'll benefit from it, and it will spark a conversation or a thought process about what they can do to make the experience better.
Yeah, and it kind of gives, to me anyway, and I think if you watch a few of them, you gain a little bit of perspective on the kind of work that you do and that your company does, because it is kind of unique. It's you're a Microsoft partner, but as I think you've said, I mean, you're not implementer. You're not out there sort of deploying the software for the clients. You're focused on training expertise, even though you have a good understanding of the functional. Yeah, I mean, what's kind of new in the work that you are doing? I know you're constantly creating new training content and programs, right?
Yes. So some of the things that we have done last year is that, as you mentioned, we have to make sure that the training that we provide has to be in line with what Microsoft is offering as a product. With the strategy of Microsoft providing updates quite frequently now to, which F&O, which is our primary product that we provide training for, one of the continuous work that we have to do is to replace our training materials for F&O, and we do that pretty much throughout the year. We watch if there's significant changes to F&O visually. Obviously, it's important to make sure our training visually matches to the product that the customers see. Also, there are additional features that Microsoft is continuously adding. We make sure those features are added. Recently, we've added some new materials, for example, for purchase requisitions, etc., that are updated and new in F&O. But in addition, towards the end of last year, we did a lot of work for 3 additional Microsoft products, and we were able to make a big release at the beginning of the year, and added new content to our platform for sales, D365 sales, D365 customer service, and D365 field service. These are, you're probably familiar, smaller products, compared to F&O, and I don't want to call it, maybe simpler is not maybe a great word, but still a simpler sort of products as far as the depth of content that you have to provide to the users, because they're really covering a single sort of business area. Specifically, sales covers the sales part, and the customer service part covers the case management, and field service covers the technician sort of experience. The main reason that we really focus on these 3 new products were our existing customers. We started to have a lot of F&O customers who are doing one or more of these products in addition to F&O. So when we demo our product and show them, we have finance and operations training, and you can utilize this throughout your organization. If they're also doing, for example, customer service, then the next question comes up: do you have training for customer service? And if you don't, then the issue is more like, we're not going to have a single source for online training for everybody. So it just creates a little bit of an issue with the potential customers. It's not something that we could not overcome, but it just makes everything easier for our customers to have everything in one place, and it's a better value proposition. So the goal wasn't really to just be in that space, be in that CE space, but more how can we make sure our F&O customers are better supported. I think it was a good decision, and potentially we may have some CE customers that are just only interested in sales, customer service, and field service. We're looking forward to working with those sort of customers, and we'll see how that materializes in the next year or so.
When it comes to the needs of those particular users, is there any difference that you would identify or anything you've noticed about that?
Not specifically. I think the advantages of having online training still exists, and even some maybe a little bit more persistent based on the product. For example, the sales, specifically D365 sales, is geared towards salespeople. You will have internal salespeople and external salespeople, and they're not going to be inclined to come to office for training. These people are very busy. They're trying to, close deals, especially the external ones are traveling. So it's a great opportunity to offer this online training as you're implementing D365 sales, and they can do it just as they're using the product and, watch this short videos that we have. And the same way for the customer service and field service, because in those cases also we specifically provide training for the supervisor role as well as the individual customer service rep or the technician role. So we cover all of the different roles within the umbrella of those products. And I think based on the type of company that you're going to be able to enjoy the advantages of having readily available online training at any point of time. And even I think these products the implementation framework for these products are shorter, and it's going to be even probably more beneficial to have something online in that short period of time. F&Os tend to be longer projects, and therefore that we offer training to different sort of audiences throughout the entire project. But for a D365 sales implementation, that's maybe going to take 2-3 months. We can offer training for the entirety of the project implementation, and the online training can be utilized as a kind of I need training versus I also need just help as a reference tool.
Okay. And in terms of how customers are approaching training today versus, say, 2 years ago, have there been any major differences or changes in that time?
I think there has been, some change since COVID. So COVID was the time where everybody was, online. I think we had sort of two different types of customers during COVID. We had people who were just going through their implementations, trying to finish it. So they were super receptive towards online training. And then we had customers that are just putting the projects on hold and just wanted to wait and see a little bit. I think today, after, everything is a little bit more settled, we are more back to the blended approach for training for D365. I think online training is still a big part of it. In-person training is something that we definitely recommend for certain types of groups of users and certain type of complexity. So we try to work with all of our customers and help them to determine what is the best method or what combination is really the best method to provide training. Remote work is an influence. After COVID also, not everybody came back to the office. Still, there's a significant amount of people that are continuing to work remotely. So from that perspective, being remote, being able to deliver training online is something that every D365 implementing company wants to have. So that's obviously an advantage to us. But as the job market changes and these remote jobs become more in office, I think the desire to provide an online option is not going to go away, but the percents on the blended approach will change. Maybe a little bit more in-person training and a little bit less online, or more online, less in-person, depending on the company's culture and structure. I have this conversation a lot with our customers. The training managers and directors who really understand their company culture and how their users learn are at an advantage. When they do have that understanding, they can make decisions to fit to different needs of the users. They say our company culture, our company likes to like discuss things and really just hash it out, and that's great, but you cannot like hash out everything. So there's a good understanding that they want to give that opportunity to the learners, but not maybe for everything. So we create a situation where some things are online, other things are instructor, and some of these things can be hashed out and questions can be asked. So I think just knowing your user community and understanding your goals for training are the key two things that just makes training a success for D365 implementations.
Yeah, I wonder if this gets back to a topic we touched on earlier, but I wonder, as you talk to current and maybe prospective future clients of yours, if they're asking questions about what the future holds for both D365. I'm thinking of F&O in particular, and it's sort of its evolution, because it does have a very interesting evolution kind of coming up with the what do you call it? Like the one version, one platform. I'm probably saying it wrong, but like the sort of one platform vision
Yes.
that it's embracing over time. And then also, some of these new technologies, like you touched on before, like what does Copilot in particular, I guess that's the most relevant, mean for our solution going forward? What does it mean for what our users need to know?
I think D365 has a really strong place in the ERP market at this time, especially F&O currently is being marketed as multiple products, which we know that Microsoft is trying to do that to be able to cater to different needs of the customer. So if somebody only wants finance, then they can buy finance. Although there's a product called supply chain, nobody's really like that. I don't know if can be even sold separately. It just needs to be together with something else. But I think it is, customers like it. I mean, the customers that I talked to, that's the other bit that's interesting, is that my job or our job is to provide training. We're not really out there trying to market necessarily D365, because that decision is already made. They already bought the product, they're implementing it. But the general feedback that we see is they find it uh, pretty good. Just the functionality wise, it's in a good space. The look and the feel is in a good place. It's pretty stable. Of course, the newer functionalities and maybe newer technologies create some issues, but I think Microsoft got into a rhythm of updating the code and being able to provide the necessary details about the new features to the customers. So from general feedback perspective, I think customers are generally excited about D365, and I think they're tremendously excited about Copilot. They're not necessarily sure how it's going to all pan out and work specifically for F&O, but there's great excitement for it out there. Obviously, ChatGPT is a big disruptor. It's going to change, I think, education in a drastic way. It's, I think, a groundbreaking change to the way that students will use search. So I'll just a little bit start with that and tie it to Copilot. When Google started, it drastically changed the way our lives worked, right? So there's now something called Google it. Whenever we don't know something, we Google it. But you Google something and then you still have to sift through pages of information and find what's relevant to you. And you also don't really have a great way of combining multiple data points from what you're looking for. And I think what ChatGPT brings to the picture is that it's a lot more specific, tremendously much more specific in answering your questions. You don't need to scroll through a bunch of information. You're going to be able to exactly get the answer that you need. How good it is right now and accurate, I'm not even going to get into that discussion because it's probably not there now, but it will get there at one point of time. And I think the biggest advantage it has is its ability to combine multiple touch points of what you're interested in into a single answer to you. I think the teachers and professors in the colleges are going to be challenged with this, but it's not something that they can ignore and ban. I think they're going to have to figure out how to make sure that the students are still learning in a way, and be able to utilize this tool that helps them to learn, which takes me to that discussion from the Student Summit. And everybody was asking these questions about, like, what is going to happen to coding? Will we ever code again? Or are we going to give it to ChatGPT? And all of these examples were given. I asked ChatGPT this, and it gave me this code, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. And one of the MEPs had a great answer for it. And I think I agree with it, is you still have to be, as a candidate for a job or a student, whatever that your position is, you still have to be analytical. You still have to understand business problems. You still have to understand data. And you still be able to ask the right question to ChatGPT or whatever the tool that you're using, to be able to get a meaningful answer that can be applied to a business problem. So if you don't know any of that, and you're not going to even know what to ask to ChatGPT, of course, it's going to help you in many cases and probably make your life a little bit easier and maybe some of the tasks shorter. But you're still going to have to learn a lot of things to be able to be an effective technology worker or a member in the Microsoft community. One of the things that was interesting is the last presentation in this student summit was about low code applications, because again, everybody was like super interested in coding. And as I was watching the low code sort of presentation, talking about how the person was talking about how she uses these different tools, and she's not a coder, she's just using data and business problems. And it just a little bit dawned on me. It's almost like a little bit like ChatGPT. It's like you're not really doing the coding, and the low code product already is going to take care of that part. But you're not going to be able to do anything unless you truly understand what the business problem is, what your data is, and how you're going to, extract the data, combine it in a meaningful way, and be able to say, okay, now we are able to provide you a business solution that will make your life easier and better. So it was just kind of an interesting epiphany, I guess you call it, for me, is that it is, yes, some maybe things that we don't necessarily have to know as much as the details, but the remaining more important, in my world, the more important things that are relevant to the customer's day-to-day life, you're still going to have to think through those and figure out how to do it. Of course, this is my answer as a functional person. I'm sure that someone who's super technical and someone who is like someone who writes code, his perspective is probably going to be a little bit different. But I'm really advocating for a lot of the functional jobs in the technology world for all of the students out there. Which kind of takes me to the whole Copilot. So I have seen, I don't know if you got a chance to watch any of the demos, but Microsoft has um, uh, some different videos offered on, for example, there's one for D365 customer service, and it talks about how Copilot can help you. I think it will be very helpful. It will minimize repetitive work. It will also minimize digging through stuff in the product. A good example is customer service. Product has multiple data sources. When you're working on a case, you can look up previous cases or knowledge articles or external resources. There's just a bunch of information. Before Copilot, a customer service rep had to look these up separately and figure out the solution and send an email back to the customer or in the chat, however that customer service rep is connected to the user. But with Copilot, the Copilot is able to look into these data sources and combine the information from different sources into one and present it to the customer service rep in a single concise message, which can then be easily transferred into email text, an email, and which then can be sent to the customer. Can it replace the customer service rep? No, because all of that information, is it accurate? Is it combined in the right way? Is it really what customer is asking for? Customer service rep is still going to have to keep an eye on those. But, yes, customer service reps work will be quicker, and then that person can focus on more difficult things instead of just combining that information into an email. So that's, I think, a good example of how Copilot will help D365 customers. F&O is a little bit different, but we can talk a little bit about that also, as far as just sort of like a future of training for F&O versus these other products as well.
Yeah, that is maybe the next logical question that I would certainly ask, and maybe you too. I mean, we both deal a lot with communication in different ways, and largely what they're showing is a communication tool that is pulling resources from multiple sources and spitting them back out in a way that's meant to sound like something a fairly smart and observant person would say, for whatever the purpose is, right? Which raises to me, all sorts of questions about what the future holds. Does it make you kind of wonder where this is going?
It does make me wonder. I mean, it does also make me wonder, like, about future of training, right? So the one of the things that I always think about is like, okay, what is the future of online training? What's the future of D365 training? What's the future of my company? Because what we are providing is a set of information for a specific, a product that is going to have this new tool called Copilot that's going to make things a lot easier to decipher. But I think one of the things that makes me confident in continuing the journey that we're in is that I think people are still going to have to learn products in a certain way. You may provide them help throughout doing certain transactions. I think that part is going to be changing in the future, click how to do something in D365. I think Microsoft, through these various tools, will offer users some options to get information as they are completing a task within D365. But what makes me a little bit comfortable, let's just say that we still have a lot of ways to go for training to be eliminated and things like that, more sort of kind of like earth shattering sort of change, is that the conceptual understanding of how the product works and how specific business problems are going to be solved using the D365 tools, is they are going to be still remain quite complicated and customer specific. So that part, I think, is going to remain. Training is going to be still very much so needed, especially for F&O, and it needs to cater to the learner's needs. So the things that we are doing are totally in line with what the learners are going to continue to need and want from training. The training has to be in small chunks. Nobody wants to go through 2 hours of videos and long chapters of materials to find what they're looking for. I think that's going to remain super strong in the training space. Everything needs to be small chunks, and it needs to be just what I need. I think conceptual training is going to be super important to teach the learners what are the concepts in the products and how these concepts are going to affect your day-to-day job. A consideration for different learner styles is going to be very important. If you're a visual learner, you are going to want visual sort of training. If you're a listener, you will need that. And if you want to be able to practice, you should have that opportunity as well. I think blended learning is going to continue to be strong. And the workforce is changing. The bottom line is all of these young, kids that I mentioned that I was in this summit, that in 10 years they are going to be working in companies that are using Microsoft D365, or they'll be implementing D365, and they're of a generation of small videos, and they even don't want to email. Everything is a different sort of communication paradigm for them. So I think as long as we are in tune with all of these different things that are happening in the business world, how the products are changing, how AI is going to change our lives, and how people are changing. The new generation is a new generation, so their values and what's important to them and how they learn and how they function is also changing. So we just need to be smart, and we need to be in tune with all of these different changes that are happening in the market, and adapt to it, pivot. So I think that's really what I would recommend to the partners and the training providers, is to really watch it and make sure that you're constantly be able to provide value, because that's what customers are looking for, not necessarily the technology, but the value that you provide to them.
Yeah, I think it's certainly too early for anyone to expect an easy answer to any of these questions, and certainly there are none out there yet. I think, as evidenced by all the work that still goes into each and every project, as you've talked about. None of them are simple, and I don't see that changing.
Yes, and one of the things, it was interesting when one of the presenters was presenting in the student summit, that she mentioned that when she started her career, the things that she's working on right now did not exist. So basically, that she is doing something completely different than what she had actually planned when she went to college. And I think she was trying to convey this to all of the the people, the young people in the thing. And I thought that was just such a great point. And it was almost like a little bit of an aha moment for a lot of them, is that you are about to graduate, let's say college now, and maybe you will spend your life working on something that just absolutely does not exist right now. So we just have to be in that mindset. We just have to be open to changes and what's happening, with always with the sense of value, bringing to the table as a person, as a company, especially in the world of education and training.
All right, excellent. Anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up here? How people can reach you, or what else you have planned coming up, maybe in your community work?
So our website is a great resource for our company. I'm sure that we'll add it to the podcast, but if you want to visit it, it's www.itembyitem.co. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm always looking for new connections, different people in the Microsoft space to collaborate with. And thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure as usual.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Elif for joining. Check out the show notes for links to Elif's site, to the new video series we discussed today, and to all of Elif's work on MSDW as well. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.